Today we will talk about jewelry from 1900s to 1920. The year 1900 didn't bring what is expected changes and innovation in the social, political, and artistic life that so many people had anticipated. The influence of the 19th century stretched in the 20th century for over a decade, and it was not until the outbreak of the First World War in 1914 and the Russian Revolution some 4 years later that Europe and America finally put the old century behind them. Indeed, the first decade of the new century was characterized by a sense of Europe holding its breath. Certainly, England has never been so prosperous before or since, and more jewelry was purchased during those years than in any period in history. When the war finally arrived, galas and formal reception disappeared overnight, and jewels were locked in security vaults or sold for survival. During the war, very little or no jewelry was produced, and jewelers often turned their skills to the military industry or went on the front. Precious metals became scarce or restricted, and in many countries, gold jewelry was donated to the stands to finance the war. The prophetic words of Lord Grey in 1914 that the lights are going all over the Europe were also to prove true of the Bunsen burners in the jewelry workshop in Birmingham. Tiaras. Tiaras are perhaps the most characteristic jewel of the early 20th century. The preserve of a moneyed elite for formal and festive occasions, tiaras were characteristic of their stylish and wealthy age. During the very early years of the century, diamond tiaras assumed winged designs or were composed of 5 or 7 star-shaped or flower-head cluster motifs, or followed the lanceolated design of the Imperial Russian tiaras of the late 19th century. Among the new designs, there being the tiara, designed in a band of rigorously geometrical Greek key motifs, was perhaps the favorite. Stylized laurel and leaves were utilized as decorative motifs for formal tiaras of bandeau design. Floral tiaras of naturalistic inspiration were still produced. The garland-style inspired tiaras of looped design, supporting pearl drop, briolets, and at once delicate and effective. By 1910, tiaras had become fashionable in Paris. Soon after, they were abandoned in New York, but in London, where the strict court etiquette had not changed, tiaras continued to be produced and worn. Earrings. Diamond ear studs were frequently worn in the first decade of the 20th century, but until Poirot's revolutionary innovation in feminine fashion, the prevailing design for earrings consisted of delicate pendants of garland style, which complemented the feminine, lacy, and delicate dress of the time. Among the most successful designs were garlands of tiny diamond leaves with a diamond of colored stone swinged center, and diamond, aquamarine, and emerald briolets suspended from articulated chains of milligrain set diamonds. Other pendant earrings assumed the form of cascades of small, stylized raceme drops. Dog collars, which first appeared at the end of the 19th century and were associated with the Prince of Wales, continued to be most acceptable form of neck ornament until the outbreak of the First World War. Entirely set with diamonds, they assumed the form of pierced bands in the garland style, decorated with swags and festoons of leaf motifs, scroll, and stylized flowers, and were often worn on a block seal or velvet ribbon, which enhanced the delicate lacy effect of the decorative motifs. Pearl chokers became even wider than those of the late 19th century, sometimes rows of small pearls held together by diamond plugs. Chokers were often worn with several rows of pearls, which left no space for the large necklaces of the 19th century tradition. Satyrs were as popular as chokers. The most expensive examples took the form of long ribbons of woven seed pearls or diamonds, terminating with 2 fringed tassels. The tassels were often substituted by circular or octagonal pendant, pierced with geometrical or stylized floral patterns in the garland style, and delicately set with diamonds. Brooches. Typical of the first 10 years of the century were bodice ornaments or divan de corsages, which were large brooches often sewed directly to the dress rather than pinned to it by means of brooch fittings. The chosen motifs were those of the garland style: abstract pierced lattices, When around 1910 the bodice disappeared from a woman's fashion, corsage ornaments became impossible to wear and in most cases were broken up and reset as jewels of smaller size. And in the last years of the 19th century, smaller brooches were worn until 1910 in large numbers. Brooches and brooch pendants in the garland style assumed the form of wreaths and swags of filigree set diamonds surrounding larger colored stones, often crowned by ribbon bow motifs, often pierced in a lattice pattern and set with diamond garlands, were among the most characteristic brooches of the time. Pendants. The most typical pendant of the early 20th century assumed the form of a circular plaque, so pierced in a lattice pattern, and applied with very delicate ribbon bows, garlands of flowers, or geometrical motifs, filigree set with diamonds. These pendants very often had a set of interchangeable gouache enamel backgrounds, which matched with their delicate pink, mauve, green, and blue, the soft colors of contemporary dresses, and were worn on long chains of baton-shaped linking, similarly decorated with gouache enamel. Bracelets. The Victorian fashion of wearing 3 or 4 bracelets or bangles on each arm died out, but women still enjoyed to wear one, often on each arm. Bracelets were usually thinner than their late 19th century counterparts, often set with a single course of calibre cut stones, or with multiple rows of gem of contrasting colors, and they were to remain one of the most favored form of arm ornament right up until the present day. Bracelets set at the front with a row of gem-set decorative links, or with a delicate elongated motif pierced and tapered at the sides on a chain back of expanding linking became fashionable. These bracelets had the double advantage of fitting well most street sizes and being less expensive than bracelets gem set throughout. Thin, late 19th century bangles continued to be used in the first years of the new century, the most acceptable design being the half hoop of diamonds, graduating in size from the center, often combined with colored stones. And today, that's all we wanted to discuss. Stay tuned for future podcasts. Goodbye.